So Gail, tell me a little bit about your background. Growing up as a child, where did you call home?
I lived on a farm in Garland, Utah. That's north of Salt Lake, about 100 miles.
At what point did you decide, or did you get to decide that you were going to go into the Air Force?
Well, it was the beginning of World War II in Europe, and I thought, well, that's going to spread here. And I look at airplanes flying over the farm, and I go back to the farm work and say, boy, I'd like to be up there. So before the war, they started a non-college pilot training program in the United States. And in Utah, it send a person to flight school to get a private pilot license. And I competed for that, got a private pilot license before the war.
You did. So aviation's always been something that you kind of had an interest in. What age would you say you got really interested in it?
Oh, about 10 or 12.
10 or 12.
10 or 12.
So
watch for airplanes.
So did you go through, like, is there a basic training operation with the Air Force that you had to go through a bunch of training exercises?
No, they had a private pilot contest, get private pilot license, and I got that and learned to fly as a private pilot before I went in the military.
Okay. So you joined the military, you know the war is, did you join before or after the war?
Well, during the war.
So you were during the war?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. Did your family have any reservations? Was your family like, oh gosh, you can't?
Well, they weren't encouraging me. They were not encouraging me, of course. They said, if that's your choice, if you want to join the military, well, that's up to you. You're old enough to decide for yourself. So, gosh, I was going on 20 years old. So I took private pilot license, a scholarship, got a private pilot license before Pearl Harbor. And when Pearl Harbor came, I signed up for the Army Air Corps. And they went to the Army Air Corps training interview, and they said, do you want to train with the RAF? I said, we're training RAF flight officers here to get them out of the English traffic pattern. You want to join them and teach them English? I said, sure, be glad to. So I joined the RAF training station, number 3 British Flying Training Station in Miami, Oklahoma, and graduated. In fact, they had me in charge of the senior cadet program and the student senior cadets. And so I had all these Brits. And I was American commander of the Brits, and that was pretty funny. We liked each other and worked out really well.
Perfect. I'm going to change camera angles just real quick, so bear with me one moment here.
While you're changing, I'm going to get around.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. There we go. So you were in there during the war. You were flying planes. You were, you were seeing things that you probably thought you would never potentially see. How did you handle that at first?
Well, as a kid who was raised on a farm, milking cows, I got out of high school, and it was a whole new world for me. Airplanes flying all around, and I'd always watched airplanes come working on the farm, and airplane would fly over, I'd stop working, watch it. It disappeared. But I always had an interest in airplanes growing up as a kid. Had paper airplanes, balsa wood airplanes, whatever, and enjoyed it, and I loved the airplanes. So airplanes was nothing new to me when the war broke out, and that's when I started thinking, well, I need to go in, and I'd already got a private pilot license, so I said, I want to go in the Army Air Corps, of course. So that's what I did, yeah.
So throughout the war, you do your duties. It gets to the point, though, that they ask you to go to Berlin. What did you hear about Berlin before you went over there and saw it firsthand? What were your worries going over there?
Well, during the war, Berlin was the center target. it was the center of the government, and it was all things bad. And so I had an aversion of what we wanted to do, participate in bringing it down, bringing the German government down. And then a few years later, they called me out of the Air Force to be the commander at Tempelhof in Berlin. And it was an opportunity that I wanted to take the share. So I accepted it. So I was the Air Force commander, Air Force personnel assigned to Berlin for not 2 years, 4 years. Finally, I said, it's about time to get on with something else. They said, okay, that's time to retire by that time. So anyway, I put in retirement papers. It wasn't too long after Berlin that I separated from the Air Force.
So where did the idea of dropping candy bars out of an airplane come from?
Well, I'd done a little bit of that. I'd had a private license before the war. And at Piper Cub, a number of us put money together, and $500 each, and bought an airplane. And you could fly over the farm and gun the engine a little bit and get Mom out of the kitchen. Come out there and I'd drop her candy bar out of the airplane. Now, I wasn't supposed to do that, and I didn't tell anybody about it at the time. But I'd made a few airdrops of candy bars before I went in the military.
Okay, so you're seeing in Berlin, you're seeing it's just destroyed. Shelled out buildings.
Yeah.
People are just displaced. They're living. They'd be better living off with nothing than the situation where they were in.
Out from bombed out.
Why? What did you think a candy bar could bring to that?
Well, I looked at the extreme poverty, devastation at the end of the war, which was deserved and applied by the Allies. But the kids, I was concerned with the kids more than anybody. They're the ones that were struggling, having a tough time. No candy, no chewing gum. And so I started dropping that stuff to them. And that became Operation Little Bills. My buddies joined in, and we dropped tons in the end of candy and gum and good things from the sky. My buddies in the Air Force really helped me out a lot.
What did it look like? I'm imagining this big plane flying at a pretty good clip of speed, and you're throwing out all these little candy bars, little parachutes. I bet that had to be a show.
Yeah, we drop a big bag of them, make a left turn, and watch them come out like guys bailing out of an airplane. So it was fun to watch. Well, the letters were the good thing. Kids got letters. I was going to school today, and the clouds were pretty low, but I heard airplanes flying over, and suddenly out of the cloud came a whole lot of parachutes with candy bars. I couldn't believe it. And my buddies and I got candy bars today. Wanted to thank you very much for it. Got tons of letters like that.
When you heard the two women in here speak about the living conditions in Berlin, and knowing that you had a positive impact, was that the end goal with the candy, with dropping it out of an airplane, was just to try to do something good out of something horrible?
Well, I was in the Air Force research and development business. They sent me through school after the war and get a master's degree in aeronautical engineering. And so when that happened, and all the more interest in the airlift came out, and the possibility and I still in the Air Force, they send me off back to Germany. And I thought that'd be good. Anyway, I'd go back and reuse my friendship. So in 1970, they sent me back at the end of my Air Force career as a colonel in the Air Force then, and went back to Berlin, and my wife and family, and Denise, my daughter who's with me today, and settled in, and after the airlift, and we had a good experience with Berlin.
So there's actually a video playing behind you on that TV screen that you saw earlier. You went back to Berlin, and I mean, they went crazy for you.
Well, it was pretty welcome reception. Yeah. Well, and that's when they sent me back as a commander at Tempelhof.
What is it that you hope people remember most about your impact with the Candy Bombers and trying to help those in Berlin? What is it you hope that is the thing that people will always remember you
For kindness of a former enemy. Kindness from a former enemy. With the idea that the world's a different place now and we're brothers and we hope we can get along okay. But I think a reconciliation of two widely different philosophies, freedom and dictatorship, and that was a very favorable result of the war. It's changing. People have a say in who the government is, who's in the government, and who's going to govern over me and decide my life in the future.
How many, right now, how many living Candy Bombers are there?
Well, I don't know. I started it, of course, and went for about 3 weeks or a month, and then got all kind of volunteers. And the volume was more than I could handle, the letters coming in. So after a few weeks, there was a really big organization. I got it organized and got parachutes over all places in Berlin and mostly in Berlin.
There were guys in there. I mean, we're talking big guys in their 20s, 30s, and they know about you.
Yeah.
You kind of just sit there in the back of your chair and you go, well, I just was doing the right thing. Like, how do you respond to something like that?
Well, just tell them those are the times, buddy. And you just see some interesting times in your career with the government involvement, and you'd be part of it. And how you handle it depends on how good you're going to last. Whether you're going to wear yourself out worrying or whether you say, hey, let's get on with it. So attitude, a couple of my creed is developed as attitude, gratitude, service before self equals real freedom. Attitude, gratitude, service before self brings a real happiness, not fake happiness. And I tell that to my kids and the other kids in my church, and I believe it. I believe that to be really happy, you got to get out of yourself for somebody else.
I think that's a very excellent way to live your life right there. Yeah. Do me a favor. What year were you born?
October the 10th, 1920.
So you told me you were 99 years old?
Yeah.
You're soon to be...
No, I'll soon be... Won't be long before it's 2020.
Man, that's a lot of years.
Yeah. Had a lot of good experiences in there. I think that service before self. Some of the times I was happiest when I was working myself for somebody else, even the enemy. Even the enemy. It shot down my buddy I taught how to fly.
So I got a really, I remember you telling that earlier, but here's a question that I wanted to follow up with you. They asked you this: what was your favorite type of candy? And you said Babe Ruth. And everybody knows, like, it's known for like dropping Hershey bars. That's like what Hershey's gets all the credit. Was that not was it everything?
Well, Hershey's was better known. Hershey's was a lot better known than Babe Ruth. But Babe Ruth was a really good bar and got a lot of great letters from them. But I dropped a lot more of Hershey's products than anybody else's. And they furnished me tons of it. Tons of chocolate dropped in the sky. The kids that hadn't had any. What better combination is that?
Because I was talking with one of the women who spoke, and she's like, when I was born, we didn't know better. We thought that, we just played in the rubbles of these concrete buildings, and that's the way that it was. And then to find out that it didn't have to be this way. So. Yeah,
the impression is that when you're born and a few years after that, and see what's going on, and you grow up with what's around you at the time.
I want to ask you this last question, and that is, what is something that people don't necessarily know about you that you think they'd find interesting? Somebody who, when we put together this video, when we share it with the museum, people might be interested to know about you.
Well, I was raised on a small sugar beet farm in Garland, Utah, northern Utah. And we had horses. We didn't have a tractor. We worked for everything we had. We had plenty to eat. We didn't have any spending money much. Saturday night movies for 25 cents was about it for the week. But it was a wonderful way to grow up. We grew everything we ate. And we had the orchard, and apple juice, and whatever. We raised about everything we had to survive during the Depression, the late 20s. And so we didn't know we had it bad, but we had a lot better than a lot of people in the United States. And so I had a great growing up. I loved my dad and mom, and we worked together, and they helped me get a scholarship to fly, and that's how it started.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me a little bit this afternoon. I really appreciate it.